Hello and welcome to this lecture. In the previous lab, you created a REST API server in a Kubernetes pod. In this lecture, you will take a look at the definition of the replica set for the REST API server. Let's get started. What is a replica set? A replica set's purpose is to maintain a stable set of replica pods running at any given time. As such, it is often used to guarantee the availability of a specified number of identical pods. Let's see how our replica set is defined. Check the contents of the backend-replicaset.yaml file under the K8 directory. The YAML file defines a replica set object with 3 replicas of the pod Fibonacci-backend-pod. To do so, it specifies the kind as replica set at line 2 and the replica count as 3 at line 9. The replica set needs to know the specification of the pods it needs to create and/or maintain. To learn how this is happening, put the ReplicaSet YAML file backend-replicaset.yaml and the pod YAML file backend-pod.yaml side by side. You will notice an interesting similarity. Let's start with pod identification. The match labels section in the ReplicaSet YAML file is how the replica set identifies the pods it needs to acquire and/or maintain. This section is just copied from the pod YAML file labels section. The match labels section identifies the pods that the replica set owns. Any pod with the labels app equals Fibonacci and tier equals backend will be acquired and maintained by the replica set. Since the pod created by the pod YAML file matches the labels app equals Fibonacci and tier equals backend, the replica set will acquire it and maintain it even though it did not create it. We will see the effect of this in the next lab. Let's move on to pod specification. The template section in the ReplicaSet YAML file is how the replica set defines the specification of the pods it needs to create. This section is just copied from the pod YAML file metadata and specs sections. The metadata subsection identifies the pod with a name of Fibonacci-backend-pod and a couple of labels app equals Fibonacci and tier equals backend. The spec section declares that the pod will run one container with the name Fibonacci-backend based on the image Oshokri/Fibonacci-backend. That's it for this lecture. You have learned about the YAML definition of a Kubernetes replica set and compared its contents to the contents of a YAML file definition for a pod. You can find a replica set reference from the Kubernetes documentation under the resources attached to this lecture. Head over to the next lab to create the replica set for the REST API server.